Hello, and welcome back to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading them. If you enjoy drifting into dark and unsettling stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I've always believed that objects hold on to something of the people who give them to us. A trace, a warmth, a piece of their presence that lingers long after they're gone. But after last night, I'm starting to think that whatever lingers doesn't always stay warm. It started with a white teddy bear. It was simple. Soft white fur, small black nose, round glass eyes, and a red ribbon tied neatly around its neck. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 5 years old. She had wrapped it herself in thin paper with tiny blue flowers on it. I still remember how her hands looked when she passed it to me. Thin, warm, slightly trembling. She died 2 years later. After that, the bear became more than a toy. It became something solid I could hold on to when everything else felt confusing. I slept with it every night for years. Even when I got older and stopped admitting that I did, it still stayed on my bed. It always stayed, but there was always something about it that unsettled me. The eyes, they were just glass, plain, shiny, dark. But sometimes, when the room was quiet and the lights were off, they didn't look empty. They looked reflective in a way that didn't match the angle of the light, as if they were catching something that wasn't there, as if they were watching. I used to tell myself it was just my imagination. Kids imagine things, especially kids who've lost someone. Still, I never liked turning my back to it in the dark. Last night, I had a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. I was lying in my bed, exactly as I had fallen asleep. The room looked the same. The posters on the wall, the faint glow from the streetlight outside slipping through the blinds, the door half open. Everything looked normal, except the air. It felt heavy, thick, like static before a storm, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. Then the whispers started. They weren't clear voices. They weren't even separate voices. It sounded like dozens, maybe hundreds, of overlapping conversations playing at once, like someone had turned on 100 radios and set each one to a different station. The words blurred together into a low, dissonant hum right next to my ear. I couldn't move. The sound pressed in from all sides. Then one sentence cut through the noise. Sharp, cold, clear. Aren't you afraid it's a demon clinging to you? The words weren't loud. They were intimate, like someone had leaned down and breathed them directly into my ear. My heart slammed in my chest. I forced my eyes toward the foot of the bed. The teddy bear was sitting there, but its head was tilted. Not just slightly off center, not cute, not curious. It was tilted at an angle that no stuffed animal's head should hold, crooked in a way that looked wrong, like its neck had snapped and it had simply chosen to stay that way. The glass eyes were no longer reflecting light. They were focused on me. Panic flooded through my body. I scrambled up in bed, my hands shaking, and grabbed the bear. It felt cold, not soft and comforting like it always had. Cold. In the dream, if it was a dream, I didn't hesitate. I shoved the bear into my backpack, the one I keep on the chair by my desk. I forced it down hard, like I was afraid it might resist. I yanked the zipper closed and pulled it tight. Then I threw the backpack into the corner of the room. The whispers started fading. Slowly, the noise thinned out until there was nothing but silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. I lay back down, breathing hard. I told myself it was over. I told myself it was just my brain twisting grief into something ugly. I forced my eyes closed. Seconds passed, or minutes. I don't know. Something made me open them again. Maybe instinct, maybe fear. The backpack was still in the corner, but it was slightly open. Just a little, and the bear was back at the foot of my bed, exactly where it had been before. The red ribbon lay perfectly flat. The fur looked untouched. But the face was wrong. The fur around the mouth was pulled tight, stretched as if something beneath it was pushing outward. The glass eyes bulged slightly, catching no light at all. The head was still tilted at that impossible angle. Before I could even scream, it made a sound. It wasn't a squeak. It wasn't a mechanical toy noise. It was a screech. High, sharp, agonized. It ripped through the room like metal scraping against metal. It felt like it tore through my ears and went straight into my skull. Inside that screech, I heard something else. A voice, sobbing and furious at the same time. Do you really want to abandon me? The words stretched and cracked, like they were being forced through something that didn't know how to speak. I bolted upright, in real life. 4:30 a.m. The room was dark, silent. My back was soaked in cold sweat. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The echo of that screech still rang in my ears, like the aftersound of a loud alarm. I didn't move. I didn't dare look at the foot of my bed. I stared straight ahead, breathing shallowly, terrified that if I turned my head even slightly, I'd see it sitting there, watching. After a few minutes that felt like hours, I slid slowly out of bed. I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want to see more than I had to. I grabbed my backpack from the chair. It felt heavier than usual. The zipper was closed. I didn't open it. I couldn't. I threw on a hoodie, shoved the bag into the closet, and left the house without even brushing my teeth. Now I'm sitting in an internet cafe, typing this with shaking hands, because I can't stay in that house. I left the bear there. I left it in my room. But here's the part that's eating at me. When I left, I could have sworn the closet door was slightly open. Just a crack. And I keep replaying the last thing that voice said. Do you really want to abandon me? I don't know if what I experienced was just a nightmare. I don't know if grief has been sitting inside me longer than I thought, slowly twisting something simple into something terrifying. But I have this sick crawling feeling in my stomach that it wasn't just a dream. I keep picturing myself going back home, opening my bedroom door, seeing the backpack sitting in the center of the floor, unzipped, and the bear back at the foot of my bed, head tilted, waiting. And this time, I'm not sure it would ask before it screamed. Story 2. I booked the overnight tour at Waverly Hills Sanatorium because I wanted to see the building for myself, not because I believed in ghosts. I've never been into the paranormal. What I like are abandoned places, cracked tiles, peeling paint, long hallways that feel frozen in time. I like photographing them when most people would rather be anywhere else. The tour started around 9 p.m. There were about 15 of us in total. Some were clearly there for the thrill. A few carried EMF meters and voice recorders, whispering about energy spikes. I carried a DSLR and a flashlight. I was there for shadows and architecture, not spirits. By midnight, the building felt different. Not haunted, just heavier. The air inside old places has a way of sitting still, like it's been undisturbed for years. The upper floors were drafty in some sections. but in others the silence felt thick enough to touch. Around 1 a.m., most of the group gathered on the fourth floor. They sat in a loose circle on the dusty floor, telling stories about previous tours. Someone claimed they'd heard a child laugh in one of the rooms years ago. Someone else swore they saw a shadow figure at the end of a corridor. I tried to listen, but I got restless. The building felt too big to just sit in one spot. So I stood up, told the guide I was going to walk around for a bit, and made my way toward the stairwell. No one tried to stop me. Overnight tours allow that kind of wandering, as long as you don't leave the building. I headed down toward the body chute. I had read about it before coming. Historically, it was used to discreetly transport bodies from the upper floors down to waiting vehicles so patients wouldn't see how many people were dying. On paper, it's just a sloped tunnel of concrete. Standing at the top of it at 1:30 in the morning is something else entirely. The entrance sits in a darker part of the building. The air there felt colder, though that could have just been my nerves. My flashlight beam cut through dust motes floating in the air as I stepped closer. The chute sloped steeply downward. When I pointed my light into it, the beam faded before reaching the bottom. The darkness swallowed it. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Not the quiet of an empty building, where you can still hear wind through broken windows. Not the distant hum of traffic. Just silence. The kind that presses in on your ears. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, adjusting my camera settings, taking in the angle of the walls. Then I heard it, a faint scraping sound from somewhere below. At first, it was subtle, like small rocks shifting or loose debris sliding a few inches along the concrete. I leaned forward slightly, holding my breath, trying to pinpoint it. The sound came again. This time it was heavier, longer, not random. It had rhythm, like something being dragged. I told myself it was nothing. Old buildings shed constantly. Pieces fall. Gravel shifts. The slope of the chute probably makes it easy for debris to slide down on its own. But the sound wasn't moving downward. It was moving upward. Slow. Controlled. There was no tumbling echo. No cascade of pebbles. It was deliberate. A steady scrape, pause, scrape, pause. Like something pulling itself up the incline. My stomach tightened. Anyone trying to climb that chute would struggle. It's steep. The concrete is worn smooth in places. You'd hear slipping, grunting, irregular movement. This wasn't irregular. I took one slow step back from the opening. The dragging stopped immediately. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. It was as if whatever had been moving knew I had moved too. I stood there, my heart pounding louder than I wanted it to. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly as I adjusted my grip. A few seconds passed. Measured, even. They echoed upward through the tunnel. Step, pause, step, pause. Not frantic, not stumbling. Anyone climbing that incline should have sounded strained. Shoes scuffing, breathing hard. Hands scraping for grip. These steps sounded stable, confident. My flashlight flickered once. Just a quick dimming, like the battery connection had shifted. In that split second of weaker light, I thought I saw something along the right wall of the chute. About halfway down, it looked tall, but compressed, like it had folded itself lengthwise to fit within the narrow tunnel. The shape clung close to the concrete, not centered in the space the way a person would climb. The light steadied. The chute looked empty again, just bare concrete. Dust. Nothing else. Then I heard breathing. It rose slowly through the tunnel, echoing faintly, Not loud, not exaggerated, just slow, steady breaths. Inhale, exhale, calm. Not like someone exhausted from climbing. Not like someone panicked. Like someone who had all the time in the world. I didn't wait to confirm what I was hearing. Every instinct in my body screamed to move. I backed away from the opening, keeping the flashlight trained downward until the angle no longer allowed it. Then I turned and walked quickly down the hallway. At first, I told myself I was just repositioning, but my pace increased without permission. By the time I reached the stairwell, I was almost jogging. The sound didn't follow me into the hall. There were no footsteps behind me, no echo, no voice calling out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked back down the corridor, I would see something at the top of the chute, watching. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor 2 at a time. When I reached the group, they were still sitting in their circle, mid-conversation. The guide looked up at me casually. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, forcing my breathing to slow. Just checking out the lower level. No one else had gone near the chute. No one had been below me. And no one else reported hearing anything. I stayed with the group for the rest of the night. I didn't wander again. As the sky began to lighten near sunrise, the building felt less oppressive. The tension drained away with the darkness. By 7 a.m., we were filing out through the main entrance into early morning air that felt almost too bright. I told myself it had been nerves. Acoustics can play tricks in tunnels. Old concrete shifts with temperature changes. Batteries flicker in cold air. That's what I told myself. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk and began reviewing the photos I had taken. Most were what I expected. Empty hallways. Broken windows framing the night sky. Peeling paint. Long corridors disappearing into shadow. Then I reached the final image from the body chute. It was taken just before the scraping started. The top of the chute filled most of the frame. The slope angled downward into darkness. The concrete was coated in a thin layer of dust. Near the lower edge of the image, just where the light begins to fade, I noticed something I hadn't seen in person. Marks. Faint. Not footprints. There were no distinct shoe patterns. They looked like drag marks, parallel streaks in the dust, and they were angled upward, not downward, like something had been pulled from the bottom toward the top. I zoomed in. The streaks weren't deep, but they were consistent, not scattered, not random, deliberate. I stared at the photo for a long time. I didn't post it. I didn't show it to anyone on the tour. I didn't send it to friends asking for opinions. I just saved it. I haven't gone back to Waverly Hills since. I still don't know what made those sounds. Maybe it was debris. Maybe it was my imagination layering fear onto normal noises. But I know what I heard. And I know what the photo shows. Whatever was in that chute that night wasn't sliding down. It was coming up. Story 3. I am 23 years old and the sole quality assurance technician for a food production facility on an unnamed moon in a system I couldn't have located on a map before. They hired me. The moon doesn't have a real name. It has a designation, MFG 7, Catering Division, Sublevel Operations. That's what the paperwork says. In my personal logs, I call it the meat moon because I need something human to call it. After 11 months here, I think I've earned that. I have a food science degree from a mid-tier university and exactly 11 months of post-grad experience. All of it has been here, on MFJ 7, confirming that canned meat product contains no more than 790 milligrams of sodium per serving. I understood the assignment. I accepted it, I would like that noted for the record. The job listing said remote operations. I understood that to mean far away. It said independent work environment. I understood that to mean alone. It said unique facility. I understood that to mean weird, in ways they weren't going to put in writing. The facility produces a canned meat product. It is essentially Spam. The company calls it something else for branding purposes, but it is Spam. Pressed meat, salt, stabilizers, gelatinized sheen. I know this product now. I know it the way someone knows their downstairs neighbor. Intimately, against their will, with a complicated mixture of familiarity and resentment. I have eaten it for 11 months, because company ration stock is the product, and the product is what's available. The reconstituted vegetable packets taste like wet cardboard mixed with regret. I have developed strong opinions about the jelly-to-meat ratio. These opinions are professionally informed and deeply personal. There is nobody here to hear them. That part, I also technically knew. Independent work environment. There is knowing something in theory. And then there is month 4, when you catch yourself responding out loud to the atmospheric recycler because it makes a sound like someone clearing their throat every 40 minutes. It never responds. I still answer it sometimes, out of politeness. The facility runs perfectly without me. That is not self-pity. It is observable fact. Automated systems handle intake, processing, pressure sealing, sterilization, crating, inventory. Conveyor belts move product through the line in a loop so consistent it feels rehearsed. The pressure sealers stamp lids with a slow, rhythmic thunk that sounds like a mechanical heartbeat. I have walked that production line roughly 300 times. Nothing ever goes wrong. My spectrometer and I show up every morning to confirm that the machines are performing exactly within parameters. We measure sodium, pH, protein ratios, internal pressure, seal integrity. I taste samples. I log findings. Everything is always correct. My actual role, after significant reflection, is to be the warm body. Some Interplanetary Food Safety Authority requires 1 licensed human QA technician on site for any facility producing food for human consumption. 1. Just the one. I am that one. I am a regulatory checkbox with a degree, a laminated badge, and a set of tasting spoons I wash by hand every night because the dishwasher in the break room, if that dim closet qualifies as a break room, has been broken since before I arrived. I filed 7 maintenance requests about it. No one fixed it. I stopped filing. My days are structured because structure is how you stay sane when you are 23 and alone on a moon made of corporate meat slabs. 0600. Wake up to the recycler's morning throat clear. Breakfast. Product. Always the product. Sometimes I mix in vegetables to create the illusion of choice. 0700. Production floor. Walk the line. Pull sample cans at 40-unit intervals. Weigh. Inspect seals. Test sodium. Log everything carefully. I file my reports every Thursday. I write them properly. Complete sentences. Clean formatting. Attached data tables. I am fairly certain no one reads them. I write them carefully anyway, because if I stop, then I am not a quality assurance technician. I am just a 23-year-old wage slave alone on a moon with processed meat and corporate silence. And I am not ready to be that yet. The only irregularity in my routine is the seat. I named it in month 3. You name things that are going to stay. The first time I noticed it was in month 2. A smell in the east, maintenance corridor. Organic, warm, metallic. I followed it to a drainage grate near the base of the wall. There was residue. dark reddish-brown, thick in the center, and crusted at the edges. I sampled it immediately. Spectrometer result: inconclusive. I filed a report. Anomalous organic discharge. East corridor. Month 2, week 3. Composition unclear. Recommend investigation by qualified facilities personnel. I am the only personnel. I wrote qualified anyway. No one came. I bought a mop. The seep became part of my schedule. Every few days, I would go down to the lower maintenance level with the mop and shovel and clear it before it pooled too wide. It smelled worse each time. I sacrificed my old university hoodie to the task because I did not want to smell like the seep all day. The hoodie is beyond saving now. It smells like something that once was alive and is not anymore. I filed 18 reports about the seep over 11 months. I have a dedicated folder, 3 automated acknowledgments, 1 real reply in month 6 from someone in facilities management who said it was likely condensation byproduct from lower processing systems and within acceptable parameters. I asked which processing systems were operating on the lower maintenance level, since all processing equipment is on the main floor. They did not reply. I archived the exchange. The folder is very organized. That brings us to last Tuesday. Routine seep removal. Lower level. Mop, shovel. Spreadsheet brain engaged. I was already drafting Thursday's report in my head when I noticed the volume was up, not dramatically, approximately 30% over my established baseline. That should not have mattered, but I track it. I built a spreadsheet because official systems were not logging seep volume. I know the averages. 30% exceeds the standard deviation I have calculated over 9 months. There was also another smell underneath the usual one. Familiar. Like hearing a song through a wall and knowing you've heard it before, but not placing it yet. I crouched down with my sample kit. Force of habit. I swabbed the residue where it had dried against the composite floor and took it to the lab. The spectrometer ran for 40 seconds. The protein markers were wrong. Not equipment malfunction wrong. Wrong like, these do not match any processing byproduct on file. Wrong like. The spectrometer appended a small automated note at the bottom of the results. Recommend cross-referencing with biological waste protocols. I read that twice, then a third time. The recycler cleared its throat. I looked around the empty lab, like someone might come explain it. No one did. It was Thursday, so I filed a report. I included the data, I attached the spectrometer output, I referenced biological waste protocol codes. I did not expect a response. I got one 37 minutes later. Not automated. Short. Proceed to sublevel archive. Retrieve facility origin file. Confirm baseline against original biological stock. That was the entire message. No greeting, no signature. Just that. I stared at it for a long time. Facility origin file. There is a sublevel archive. I have never been in it. It is listed on the schematics as storage, restricted. I do not have clearance for most restricted areas. My badge opens what I need to perform QA duties. That has always been sufficient. I told myself I was not going. Then I remembered the spectrometer's note. Biological waste protocols. Origin file. Baseline. I took the elevator to sublevel 3. I had never been below sublevel 2. Sublevel 3 smells different. The air is colder, thinner, less recycled. The lighting is dimmer and flickers slightly in a way the main production floor never does. There is a door labeled Archive. My badge did not work. I tried it twice. Then, without me touching it, the lock disengaged. There was no mechanical click, just a soft shift. The door opened inward. The archive is not large. Metal shelves, physical files, printed binders. That was my first shock. Everything else in this facility is digital, automated, optimized. The origin file was on the center table, not on a shelf, waiting. It was a thick binder, labeled MFG7, Primary Biomass Documentation. My hands felt cold when I opened it. The first pages were technical descriptions: tissue density, regenerative stability, nutritional optimization, protein yield per cubic meter. Then there were images, photographs. The primary biomass was not livestock. It was not any animal I recognize. It looked almost human. Not exactly. The limbs were too long, the torso slightly compressed, the facial structure blurred, like the features never fully resolved. The captions used words like adaptive substrate and compliant neural tissue. I flipped pages faster. There were diagrams of internal structures, regeneration nodes, tissue harvest schedules, below that a chart, waste reclamation rates, organic discharge pathways, sublevel drainage maps, east maintenance corridor highlighted. I felt my pulse in my ears. The seep. I turned another page. There was a section labeled Behavioral Drift. Initial stock exhibited minimal autonomous activity. Over time, substrate demonstrates directional fluid migration patterns. Recommend human oversight to ensure continued compliance. Human oversight. 1 licensed QA technician on site. 1 warm body. I stood there in the dim archive, holding the binder. The recycler is not on sublevel 3. There was no throat clear. Just silence. Something shifted in the walls. Not mechanical. Not like the conveyor belts upstairs. A slow, wet movement. From below, the seep is not condensation. It is not processing byproduct. It is runoff. I looked at the drainage map again. The east corridor grate is directly above sublevel 4. There is no sublevel 4 on the official schematics. The floor beneath my feet felt faintly warm, not the dry heat of machinery. Organic. Alive. I closed the binder carefully. I put it back exactly where it had been. I returned to my lab. I washed my tasting spoons. I ate my rationed meat. I wrote this in my personal log. Tomorrow is Thursday again. I will file a report. And I will walk the line, because the machines are perfect, and something underneath them is not sliding down. It is growing up. Story 4. I've been working at a small storage facility for about 3 years now. It doesn't pay well, but it keeps my hands busy, and sometimes that's enough. When my sister went missing, the house became unbearable. Every room felt wrong without her in it. Every silence felt louder than it should have. I needed somewhere to go, where the lights were harsh, and the air smelled like dust and cleaning solution, instead of memories. One day she was there. The next she wasn't. No note, no signs of forced entry, no witnesses. Just gone. We searched for weeks. My parents printed flyers until the ink cartridges ran dry. We talked to neighbors, called friends, checked her phone records. The police did what they could, but eventually they stopped calling as often. They stopped looking at us with urgency and started looking at us with pity. My parents held on to hope like it was oxygen. They believed she was alive somewhere. They believed she'd walk back through the front door one day and laugh at all of us for worrying. I wanted to believe that too. But most days, my hope felt thin and fragile. It cracked easily. Sometimes I hated myself for even thinking she might be gone for good. That's what brought me here, to this cold warehouse with fluorescent lights that hummed constantly overhead. Rows and rows of concrete storage units, each one holding someone's forgotten life. I needed to be anywhere but home. Working here, I've seen all kinds of renters, people dragging in boxes filled with old photo albums, furniture wrapped in plastic, childhood trophies, baby clothes, Christmas decorations, things they swear they'll come back for someday. I never really understood why people paid to store so much junk. Why not throw it away? Donate it? Let it go. But I guess when you lose something important, you start holding on to everything else tighter. A lot of our renters eventually stop paying. Life changes. They move. They forget. Or they just decide it's not worth it anymore. When that happens, we call them, email them, send letters. If there's no response, the unit goes up for auction. Whatever is inside goes to the highest bidder. I've seen people spend thousands hoping for hidden antiques or rare collectibles, only to walk away with broken chairs and moldy clothes. No refunds. When one particular renter stopped paying, I was surprised. Daniel Marshall. That's the name he signed on his contract. He always looked like someone who had his life together. Sharp suit, tie, expensive-looking glasses resting on the bridge of his nose, clean haircut, calm smile. The first time he came in, he carried a single plastic storage bin. Nothing unusual about that. He greeted me politely, rode the elevator up to his unit, and stayed there for about an hour and a half. When he came back down, he was whistling an old tune like he didn't have a care in the world. After that, he came in every other week. Sometimes he brought trash bags filled with old toys. Other times it was blankets, comforters, paint buckets. Once or twice I saw what looked like medical equipment, tubing, metal stands, things that didn't quite fit with the rest. It all looked worn and dirty. I figured maybe he'd cleaned out a relative's house after they passed away. Still, there was something about him that bothered me. Every time he came in, there was a smell, faint at first, then stronger as he walked past the desk on his way out. Something sour, something chemical, something wrong. And he always left with that same little grin, not wide, not exaggerated, just enough to feel unsettling. After months of this routine, he stopped showing up. The payments kept coming for a while. Then those stopped too. We tried calling, left voicemails, sent notices. Nothing. Eventually, the unit went to auction. $5,000. That's what someone paid for it. The highest bidder was a middle-aged guy who looked excited and nervous at the same time. I handed him the key and explained the rules. 72 hours to clear everything out. After that, it gets tossed. He nodded eagerly and headed for the elevator. He came back less than 2 minutes later. His face was pale, his mouth slightly open. He wasn't breathing right. At first, he didn't say anything. He just stared at me. I stood up slowly. "What's wrong?" He swallowed hard. I need you to come upstairs," he said. "Right now." We rode the elevator together. The air felt thick. He didn't touch the key. When we reached the unit, the shutter door was still closed. "Put your ear to it," he said quietly. I frowned. "What?" "Just listen." I stepped forward, pressed my ear against the cold metal. At first, nothing. Then, a faint sound. Soft, broken, a muffled whimper. My stomach dropped. It sounded like a child trying to cry through something. My hands started shaking as I grabbed the key from him and slid it into the lock. I didn't even realize I was praying until I heard myself whispering, "Please, please, please." The shutter door rolled up. The smell hit first. Urine, feces, chemicals. That sterile hospital odor mixed with rot. I staggered back for half a second. Then I saw her. She was sitting in the far corner of the unit, inside a makeshift playpen built from stacked boxes and plastic panels. Her body was thin, too thin, her cheeks hollow, her skin pale and dry. Her eyes looked up at me. And I knew before my brain even let me form the thought. It was my sister. Her hair was longer now, tangled, dirty. But it was her. Her lips. God, her lips had been sewn together with thick black thread. Crude stitches, dried blood crusted around the edges. A feeding tube ran from a metal stand into her nose. Around her were toys, old dolls, stuffed animals, blankets, like someone had tried to build her a little room. Like someone thought that made it okay. I don't remember falling to my knees, but I must have. I threw up right there on the concrete floor. The man behind me cursed and backed away, but I didn't hear much after that. Everything felt distant, muffled. I crawled toward her. Her eyes followed me. There was fear in them, and something else. Recognition. I whispered her name. She made a small sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a word. My hands shook as I cut the threads from her lips. I didn't care if I hurt her. I just needed them gone. I lifted her in my arms. She was so light, lighter than I remembered, like holding a bundle of bones wrapped in skin. She smelled like chemicals and sickness and something worse. I carried her down the elevator. I don't remember calling an ambulance. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. It all blurred together. She's there now, alive. Barely, but alive. Doctors say she's severely malnourished, dehydrated, traumatized beyond what they can measure. They don't know how long she was in that unit. I do. I worked there. I saw Daniel Marshall come in every other week. I saw him bring toys, blankets, medical equipment. I smelled that stench and told myself it wasn't my business. I watched him smile at me and walk out the door. Daniel Marshall. That's the name you signed. That's the name on the contract. I don't know if it's real, but I will find you. I replay every interaction in my head now. Every time I waved him through. Every time I didn't question the smell. Every time I chose not to look too closely. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. You built a prison for my little sister inside my own workplace. You hid her in plain sight. And I promise you, with everything I have left in me, I will make sure you never hide again. Story 5. I don't think many people remember the channel now. A few might. It was online for a while, long enough to gather a small following, but not long enough to become anything big. Even if someone did remember it, they probably wouldn't find it anymore. Every video, every comment, every trace of it has been wiped clean. It's like it never existed, if you do remember it. If something about it rings a faint bell in the back of your mind, then it's probably her you're thinking of. Ella, the pretty blonde girl with the gap-toothed smile and the kind of warmth that made you feel like you'd known her forever. She had this glow about her. When she laughed, people turned their heads. When she listened, you felt heard in a way that was almost uncomfortable, like she could see deeper than you wanted. If you remember anyone from those videos, it won't be me. I was just the one behind the camera. The idea for the channel was simple. We wanted to find hobbies that weren't getting much attention, strange little passions that only small groups of people cared about. and document them. Ella used to say we were preserving something important. She didn't care about views or subscribers. I did. A little. But she didn't. To her, it was something bigger. These hobbies, she told me once, red wine staining the edge of her smile. They're part of who these people are. Their lives. Their souls. Little cultures that no one talks about. If no one records them, they just disappear. Our videos can be like little monuments. Proof they existed. That night, the channel was born. We were both film students at the time. She had imagination, emotion, vision. I had technical skills. I knew how to frame a shot, how to adjust lighting, how to clean up audio. Alone, neither of us could have done much. Together, we worked. Our first video was about fly fishing. If it had been up to me, I would have filmed a river at sunset and read facts from Wikipedia in a calm voice. But Ella wanted something real. We ended up following a 12-year-old boy named Bradley for a day. We met him by chance on a bus heading toward a fishing spot. He was sitting alone, his fishing rod sticking out of his backpack. Ella just started talking to him, like she'd known him forever. He opened up immediately. I filmed him standing by the water, casting his line into the sunlight. The loops of fishing line caught the light in a way that made them look almost magical. He told us his grandfather had taught him how to fish. His grandfather had passed away, and now he fished to feel close to him. For a kid, he spoke with a depth that surprised me. He talked about the river like it was alive, like it remembered. When he ran his hand across the surface of the water, he spoke about pollution, about how the river wasn't what it used to be. There was sadness in his voice. Ella had been right. We weren't just filming a hobby. We were capturing something deeply personal. Over the next few months, we covered more subjects: ham radio operators, metal detector enthusiasts, people who built model ships in their garages. The views were small but steady, 100 here, 200 there. But the numbers didn't matter to Ella. What mattered was the connection. Then, the UFO convention happened. It wasn't something we had planned. Ella heard about it being held at a hotel nearby and insisted we go. I wasn't excited. In my mind, I pictured conspiracy theorists in wrinkled shirts yelling about government mind control. But when we arrived, it was surprisingly normal. The room was full. People were chatting politely. Some had booths with books and photos. Ella chose an older man with a thin gray beard to interview. He surprised me. For me, he said calmly, it's about hope. The world can feel small, scary, but if you look up at the sky, you realize there's more. There has to be. It was a good interview. Thoughtful, balanced. Then someone started shouting behind us. A man with dark circles under his eyes was yelling, tears streaming down his face. You don't know what they are, he screamed. You don't know what they do. Security dragged him out. Ella watched him leave with an expression I couldn't quite read. We need to talk to him, she said. We already had enough footage. More than enough. But Ella had that look in her eyes, the one that meant she'd already decided. That's how we met Anthony Davidson. He sat in front of my camera, pale and tense. My daughter was taken 3 years ago, he said. He told us they had been hiking on the moors near Christmas. It got dark quickly. He tried to take a shortcut. The ground was muddy and hard to cross. His daughter, Charlotte, was small. She was cold. He carried her for a while. Then they saw lights, small red lights hovering above them. There was a flash. He woke up in a white room. Bright, too bright. He couldn't move. He said he saw figures. Gray skin, large black eyes. When he woke up again, he was in a hospital far from home. Charlotte was gone. He cried openly on camera. That night on the tram home, Ella was quiet, too quiet. "We need to look into this," she said suddenly. I told her no. This wasn't our kind of project. She smiled in a way that made me uncomfortable. After that, she became distant. For 2 days, she barely spoke to me. Then one night she texted, "Come over. I think I found something." I went without hesitation. Her apartment was covered in papers and maps. She had found that the area where Anthony claimed it happened had once had public footpaths running through it. Then, about 10 years ago, the land was purchased by a nonprofit called Havisham. After that, the paths disappeared from new maps. The strange thing was that Havisham didn't seem to exist outside that purchase. No website, no records, nothing. Ella thought it was a shell company, government-owned, covering something up. I told her she was spiraling. The next morning, we drove to the moors anyway. The sky was clear and blue. The wind was sharp and cold. For a moment, it felt normal again. We sang along to pop songs in her old car. We parked near a scenic overlook. From there, we could see the stretch of land Anthony had described. It looked like any other part of the moor. An old farmer approached us. He told us about sheep that had been found dead years ago. Organs missing, bodies strangely clean. Ella's eyes lit up in a way that made my stomach tighten. That night, she convinced me to stay. We met Anthony at a pub. He looked worse than before, more fragile, more desperate. He agreed to take us to the spot. It was pitch black when we walked out onto the moor. Wind howled around us. Mud soaked through my shoes. I filmed in infrared, watching the world through green-tinted darkness. At some point, I realized I had fallen behind. I hurried forward and tripped over something buried in the mud. At first, I thought it was a branch. It wasn't. It was smooth, white, a bone. I pulled more from the mud. Ribs, a skull, small, too small. Then bright lights exploded around us. Drones hovered above, shining floodlights down. Figures in gray protective suits surrounded Anthony and Ella. They carried rifles. Anthony was holding one of them at knife point, screaming about his daughter. I saw Ella on the ground, hands over her head, terrified. There was shouting. I couldn't hear the words. Then there was a blinding flash. I woke up the next morning, alone on the moor. My clothes were dry. My camera was gone. Ella was gone. Anthony was gone. The bones were gone. When I checked online later, our channel had vanished. Every video erased. I reported Ella missing. No trace of her has ever been found. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all. But I know I didn't. Because some nights, when I close my eyes, I still see those red lights hovering in the dark. And I still hear Anthony screaming, asking where his daughter is. No one ever answered him. No one has answered me either. Story 6. Every night and every single day, I see it. It doesn't matter if the sun is high in the sky or if the world is wrapped in darkness. It's there, standing at the edge of my property, just far enough away that I can't make out every detail at first glance, but close enough that I know it's watching me. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it came from. I don't even know when exactly it first appeared. All I know is that whatever is standing out there is not human. The first time I saw it, I thought I was imagining things. I live alone, miles away from the nearest town, in a small house surrounded by open land and scattered trees. At night, it's so quiet. You can hear your own heartbeat if you focus hard enough. I'm used to isolation. I chose it. But 3 days ago, that quiet changed. It was late evening when I noticed something standing near the tree line. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. The sun was setting, and shadows stretch in strange ways at that hour. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. It was still there. It wasn't tall, maybe 5'4" at most. Its body was thin, painfully thin, like the skin was stretched tight over bone. Its arms hung too long at its sides, and even from that distance I could see its fingers. The nails were long, not just untrimmed, but long in a way that looked unnatural, like claws that had never been cut. I stepped closer to the window. That's when I saw its face. Its skin was gray, not the pale gray of someone sick, but a dull, lifeless gray, wrinkled and sagging in places, like something much older than it should be. It had no nose, just a flat space where one should have been, and its eyes, they were huge, bright white, no pupils that I could see, just wide, empty white eyes staring straight at me. It was smiling. Its mouth stretched far too wide across its face, wider than any human mouth could stretch. The corners of its lips almost touched the sides of its head. Its teeth were stained dark, like they had been dipped in blood. That smile never moved. It was frozen there, carved into its face. It lifted one hand, and it waved at me, slowly, back and forth, like it was greeting an old friend. I froze in place. I couldn't even blink. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at it, while it stared back at me. When I finally forced myself to look away, it felt like my body was breaking through something thick and heavy. I turned my head for just a second, just to breathe. When I looked back, it was closer. Not by much, maybe a few feet, but it was closer. That was the first night. The second day, it was still there, in the exact same position it had moved to, still smiling, still waving. Its arm moved in a slow, steady rhythm, like it had all the time in the world. Every time I looked away, even for a second, it moved closer. It never ran. It never made a sound. It just appeared closer. By the third day, I hadn't slept. I couldn't. Every time I shut my eyes, I imagined opening them to find it pressed against the glass. I watched it for hours, barely blinking, afraid that if I looked away too long, it would reach my porch. Its head was wrong. I couldn't stop staring at it. The back of its skull stretched out longer than normal, like the shape was pulled backward. It reminded me of those alien creatures you see in movies. Long, curved skull. But this wasn't a movie. This was outside my house. And it kept waving. That smile never faded. If anything, it looked wider each day. Like it was enjoying this. Like it was taunting me. On the third evening, something inside me snapped. Fear turned into anger. I was tired of feeling helpless in my own home. I grabbed my shotgun from the closet. My hands were shaking, but I told myself I wasn't afraid anymore. I flung the door open and ran outside, the cold air hitting my face. I raised the shotgun, ready to fire. But the spot where it had been standing was empty. It was gone. I spun around, scanning the trees, the open field, the shadows. Nothing. No footprints in the dirt. No broken branches. No sign that anything had ever been there. My heart started pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. Then a thought hit me so hard it felt like someone punched me in the chest. What if it's inside? I ran back into the house and slammed the door shut behind me. I locked it, even though I wasn't sure locks would matter. I moved through each room slowly, the shotgun raised. I checked every corner, every closet, under the beds, behind the shower curtain, the attic, the basement, every dark space I could think of. Nothing. The house was empty. I went back to the living room, my chest tight, my breathing uneven. I forced myself to look out the window again. It was there, standing exactly where it had been before, smiling, waving. I felt something inside me crack. "What the hell are you?" I screamed at it through the glass. "What do you want from me?" It didn't react. It didn't stop waving. It didn't blink. It just stood there, smiling that impossible smile. I stared at it for 2.5 days after that. I barely ate. I barely moved. I was afraid that if I stopped watching, even for a minute, it would be at my door. Eventually, exhaustion won. I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember my eyes burning and my head feeling too heavy to hold up anymore. When I woke up, sunlight was pouring through the window, and it was closer, so much closer. It was near the edge of my yard now. I could see the wrinkles in its skin clearly, the stains on its teeth, the cracks in its gray lips. I live in the middle of nowhere. There are no neighbors for miles. Even if there were, how do you explain something disappearing the second you step outside? I started to question my own mind. Maybe I was losing it. Maybe isolation had finally broken me. But no, I'm not crazy. That thing is real. Because strange things started happening. My car wouldn't start. The engine just clicked and died, even though it had worked fine before. The lights in my house stopped turning on. Every bulb went out at once. The power lines outside looked intact, but nothing worked. My phone had stopped working the first night it appeared. No signal, no battery life. It just died in my hand. I was trapped in my own house, with that thing slowly closing the distance. Each time I blinked, it was a little closer. Each time I looked away to drink water or use the bathroom, it had moved again. It never rushed. It didn't need to. It knew I couldn't leave. Last night, something changed. I went to the window, like I always do. But it wasn't there. The yard was empty. For the first time in days, the space outside my house was clear. Relief washed over me so fast, I almost collapsed. Then, I heard it. A loud thud from downstairs. It sounded like something heavy hitting the front door. Then scratching. Slow, deliberate. Long nails dragging against wood. I froze at the top of the stairs, the shotgun shaking in my hands. Another thud. The door rattled in its frame. Then I heard breathing. Deep, slow, right on the other side of the door. Not the wind, not an animal. Breathing. I can hear it right now. It's standing there. I don't know how it got from the yard to the door without me seeing it. I don't know how long it's been there. The scratching has stopped. The breathing hasn't. It's steady, calm, like it's patient, like it knows I'm trapped. There's something worse, though. I just noticed the waving has started again, but not at the window. There's a shadow under my bedroom door, and it's moving back and forth like a hand, slowly waving. It's here. Story 7. The dashboard clock glowed 11 p.m. as a black Ford SUV rolled slowly past Green State Psychiatry and South Burlington High School in South Burlington, Vermont. It moved like it had all the time in the world, creeping down Kennedy Drive beneath a cloudy sky, where the moon kept slipping in and out of view. The neighborhood looked ordinary in that quiet late-night way. A few locals were still outside, bundled up against an unexpectedly cold September wind. Cars passed now and then, their tires making a soft hiss on the pavement, a horn sounding once in the distance, and then fading again. No. One gave the SUV much attention. A father in a gray shirt with the word fake printed across the chest glanced at it for a second and kept walking, still chatting cheerfully with his 4-year-old son. The kid tugged along a black robotic toy dog on a leash, and its little speaker made soft, fake barks that drifted after them. The SUV's headlights swept over maple trunks and honey locust branches, over parked cars and neat lawns. Then the lights disappeared as the vehicle turned into Woodland Place and finally stopped in front of a white, traditional suburban home at 12 Woodland Place. A faded red ride-on push car sat near one corner of the yard, half swallowed by overgrown grass, like someone had meant to move it and never did. The SUV stayed still, engine off, no doors opened. It just waited. Across the street, other houses watched in silence. Porch lights glowed behind curtains. A flag of the Stars and Stripes fluttered above the home's porch, lifting and falling with the wind as if the house itself was standing guard. Upstairs, the second-floor bedroom was warm and bright. 31-year-old Zuri sat on her queen-sized bed, her back against the headboard, sipping a glass of warm, creamy milk while she typed on her iPhone. Justin Bieber played softly from the phone's speaker, the song Ghost looping through the room with a gentle sadness that didn't quite match her mood. Her WhatsApp group chat was buzzing again. Her coworkers always did this. Once someone asked a personal question, everyone piled on. Tonight, the topic was her son, and the message thread was rolling fast. No, he's pretty camera shy, Zuri typed, adding a laughing emoji like it was all harmless and cute. Under the bed, something warm and wet touched her foot. A slow, familiar lick. It made her smile without thinking. She glanced at her wall where framed photos hung in neat rows. There was a picture of a golden retriever puppy sitting proudly in front of South Burlington's whale tail sculpture. Another showed the same puppy on the beach at Red Rocks Park, fur glowing in the sun. The photos were bright and happy, the kind people posted to prove their lives were full and normal. No way was she sending pictures to the group chat. Not to anyone. Not ever. If the conversation got too personal, she usually just stopped replying and scrolled through articles until the topic shifted. But tonight, everyone was in the mood to tease and praise and ask for more. When someone asked again how her son was doing, Zuri simply wrote, "He's fine." The replies kept coming, half compliments and half jokes. People praised her work, her assertiveness, how she'd helped land clients for the latest family insurance policies their boss wanted to push. Zuri leaned into it, letting the words fill her like warmth. She liked being admired. She liked being seen as competent and steady. "It's nothing really," she typed. Save those compliments for Dr. Jennifer at Green State Psychiatry. Her advice about an emotional support dog really worked. And she makes amazing creamies. She added a drooling emoji, like she was just being playful. Another lick came from beneath the bed, and Zuri's shoulders loosened. She'd been enjoying those licks for 5 years. They had carried her through the worst parts of her life. The divorce, the nightmares, the memories of childhood that still clawed at her whenever she was alone in the dark. When she felt herself slipping, she reached down, and the comfort was always there. The chat shifted to other topics. People complained about their boss. They speculated about a possible company trip to Hawaii. Someone posted a picture of a golf course. Zuri replied with a few laughing emojis, but exhaustion was creeping in. She turned her head to the digital clock on her bedside table. It was 11:32 p.m. Next to the clock sat a pet food warehouse coupon she'd been meaning to use. With a sigh, she typed her final message. Turning in now. Want to get to the pet store early tomorrow. Replies came instantly. Good night. Let's play golf soon. Hope you'll let us visit you one day. Enjoy your super long month off. She smiled at the screen, set the empty glass down, and placed her phone on the bedside table. Then she got up and walked to her window. She liked checking outside before bed. It made her feel in control. Her house was her fortress, her safe place. She pulled the curtains open, and her body jumped back as if the air itself had slapped her. A trichopter drone drifted past the glass, its propellers slicing the night with a sharp, buzzing whine. A camera lens sat beneath it like an unblinking eye, aimed straight at her. Zuri's mouth fell open. Her heart kicked hard once, then again. Across the street, in the house framed by copper-brown hedges around the door, her neighbor Sam stood at his own second-floor window. He was 18, slender, pale, and wearing nothing but black boxer briefs. Both his hands held binoculars, and he had them trained directly on her bedroom. For a second, Zuri couldn't move. It felt unreal, like a scene from a bad prank video. Then anger flooded her so fast, it almost made her dizzy. She slid her window open and shouted curses into the cold air. She raised her hand and flipped him off with all the fury she had. The drone zipped back toward Sam's window, as if it belonged to him, as if it was being called home. Sam lowered the binoculars. He gave a brief wave that looked apologetic, the kind of wave you give when you've been caught and don't know what else to do. Then he pulled the drone inside, and his figure vanished into the darkness of his bedroom. Zuri slammed her window shut so hard the sound echoed down the street. She yanked the curtains closed like she could erase what she'd just seen. Her hands were shaking as she grabbed her phone again and typed quickly into the group chat. Do you guys remember my Flatlander neighbor? That asshole's at it again. Messages poured in right away. Some told her to call the police. Others told her to record him. A few were angry on her behalf, using words sharper than hers. Zuri stared at the suggestions and felt her stomach twist. Calling the police meant attention. It meant questions. It meant people talking. In a small city like South Burlington, gossip moved faster than weather. One slip, one scene, and suddenly your name became a story passed around dinner tables and posted online. She remembered last year, when a Girl Scout had offered to help carry her heavy groceries. Zuri had snapped without meaning to. Just a quick, harsh reaction, born from panic, from not wanting anyone close. Within an hour, the South Burlington resident Facebook group had posts about it. People wrote comments like they knew her, like they understood her, like they were entitled to judge her. Some residents had started calling her the Recluse. She hated the nickname, but she also hated how true it felt. She hated guests, hated visitors. She avoided opening the door even when delivery drivers knocked. She could live months without letting anyone inside. Her home was hers, sealed and safe. I'll do something great one day, she muttered to herself, trying to steady her breathing. Like Lavinia Bright, something everyone will know me for. But not like this. Not for being a headline. Not for being the center of attention. Her phone buzzed again. One of her co-workers, someone she knew was friendly with Sam, had replied. He's just a stressed-out kid, Zuri. Imagine studying computer science at UVM. Another message followed. He misses his family in Rochester. New York isn't exactly around the corner. More co-workers defended Zuri, but the same colleague wrote again. He's actually a really nice kid once you get to know him. Really nice. Didn't you open up to him when he moved in? Zuri's thumb hovered over the screen. Her jaw tightened. She locked the phone without answering and leaned back against her bed, staring at the curtains like they had personally betrayed her. Late June. That was when Sam moved in. Zuri remembered seeing him carrying boxes into the house across the street, smiling at everyone like he belonged there already. She didn't usually talk to neighbors, but something about his energy had pulled her in. Maybe it was the way he looked so young and eager, like he wanted to make friends. Maybe it was her brief, strange desire to feel like a helpful adult in someone else's story. She had introduced him to the neighborhood. She'd even driven him to campus for freshman events. It had felt harmless, just neighborly. But then Sam started asking questions. At first, they were small ones, normal. What do you do for work? Where are you from? How do you like Vermont? Zuri answered carefully, keeping things light. Then the questions shifted. Who lives with you? How old is your kid? Why don't I ever see him outside? What's his name? She began dodging, her instincts flaring. The questions felt too sharp, too pointed, like hooks looking for something under her skin. A week ago, his drone had flown close to her house while she was feeding her pet. She'd marched across the street, furious, and confronted him. Sam insisted it was an accident, a code bug that made the drone drift off course. He looked sincere. He looked embarrassed. She had given him the benefit of the doubt. But tonight there was no doubt left. She told herself that in the morning she would email the university. She'd complain. She'd report him. She'd do it quietly, in a way that wouldn't spread. She just needed sleep. She showered, letting the hot water calm her nerves. When she returned to her bedroom in her nightgown, the anger had cooled into something heavier. She crouched beside the bed and reached her hand under it. A warm lick brushed her fingers, slow and reassuring. Her shoulders loosened again. She breathed out, shaky but grateful. She reached for her sertraline and sleeping pills on the bedside table and heard a sound. Drip, drip, drip. Zuri frowned. The sound wasn't coming from the bedroom. It sounded like water, steady and slow, the kind of sound that gets into your skull if you let it. She walked to the attached bathroom and turned on the light. She checked the sink, the shower, the pipes. Nothing. She stepped back into the bedroom. Drip, drip, drip. It sounded louder now, lower, downstairs. Unease twisted in her stomach. The idea of walking into the dark lower floor made her flinch. It hit something old inside her, something she tried not to think about. She was 7 again for a flash, locked in a basement, hearing footsteps above, hearing dripping, waiting for the next punishment. Her abusive mother's voice still lived somewhere behind her ribs, blaming her for everything, striking her for existing. Zuri swallowed hard and forced her mind away from it. South Burlington had been ranked one of the safest cities in America. She'd read that. She clung to it like armor. What was there to fear? I haven't done anything wrong, she whispered, as if the house could hear her. She reached under the bed again, searching for reassurance. Another lick touched her skin, and it gave her enough courage to move. She turned on her phone's flashlight. She tossed a toy bone from her desk under the bed and said, stern and automatic, stay. Then she grabbed a golf club, leaning against the wall. It was her prized one, heavy and solid. She held it like a weapon, like it could keep the world out. Drip, drip, drip. Her bedroom door creaked open. The hallway beyond was dark. The phone's light cut a narrow tunnel through it. She stepped out, one careful step at a time, and descended the stairs. The dripping echoed in a strange way, almost uneven, almost like it wasn't water at all. Like something was choosing the rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. She reached the bottom step. Before she could take another step forward, something yanked the golf club from her hands with sudden force. It clanged across the wooden floor. The sound, sharp and wrong. Zuri barely had time to inhale before powerful hands shoved her forward. Her face hit the floor. Her phone flew from her grip and landed with a dull thud, its flashlight beam spinning across the room like a panicked eye. She screamed. She thrashed, kicked, clawed, tried to twist away. Nothing worked. A knee pressed hard into her back, pinning her down. Someone held her wrists with practiced strength. Then the living room lights snapped on. Zuri's vision blurred as she blinked against the brightness. Through the corner of her eye, she saw a slender white man in plain clothes, sprinting out of the kitchen with a small clicker in his hand. He didn't look at her. He ran straight up the stairs, like he knew exactly where he was going. Realization slammed into her like a wave. "No!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "Don't touch my dog. Don't you touch him. Don't you touch him." Upstairs, there was a burst of movement, a struggle, a muffled cry. Zuri sobbed and screamed into the floor, trying to lift her head, trying to see. The man came back down the stairs slowly. His face looked strained, almost sad, like he wished this wasn't happening. In his arms, he carried her dog, a small body in a furry golden retriever suit, a collar tight around his neck. Her 6-year-old son. For a second, Zuri couldn't understand what she was looking at. Her mind rejected it, pushed it away, tried to replace it with the version of reality she could tolerate. Then the house filled with sound. More footsteps, voices, doors opening, radios crackling. South Burlington police officers and Child Protective Services flooded in, moving with purpose. Zuri was handcuffed on the floor while an officer read her Miranda rights, in a voice that held barely contained anger. Her son was carried out into the night, and officers patted his back gently like they were trying to remind him he was human, like they were trying to pull him back into the world. Zuri's eyes locked onto the clicker at an officer's waist. Rage flared again, messy and loud. "You tricked me," she screamed. "You tricked me with that dripping." The officer didn't deny it. He didn't soften it. The dripping sound hadn't been a leak at all. It was bait, meant to draw her out of the upstairs bedroom, so they could get control without risking something worse. As they hauled her to her feet, one officer stared at her like he couldn't understand what kind of person he was looking at. "What's wrong with you?" he snapped. "Can't you see? That's your son." Zuri jerked against the cuffs, her face twisted tight with certainty that made her look frighteningly calm beneath the screaming. "That murderer," she shrieked. "He got what he deserved. And now my dog is back," she ranted, voice cracking, about a jade vase 3 years ago, about how it had toppled and killed the puppy, about how her son had agreed to take the puppy's place. She said it like it was a fair trade, like it was a simple decision, like the world was supposed to nod and accept it. Radio chatter spilled from an officer's shoulder. Paramedics had found bruises and scars on the boy's body. Investigators upstairs were collecting evidence. A whip, lighters, things being sealed into bags with gloved hands. Zuri was escorted outside. The street had transformed. Flashing blue and red lights painted the houses. A broadcast van was parked nearby, and an NBC5 reporter stood under a bright camera light, speaking with quick, serious words. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering, pointing, holding up phones. Some looked shocked. Some looked like they'd been waiting for a reason to talk about Zuri for years. She barely reacted. She only glared across the street at Sam, now fully dressed, speaking to officers near an unmarked police SUV. Someone loaded a drone and controller into a hard black case. Zuri's hatred burned hot and steady. She understood now. Sam hadn't been spying for fun. He'd been watching for proof. A police officer asked his partner about the teenager. "That computer science kid?" the partner said. "His observation skills are wicked good." The partner explained that Sam had been confused when Zuri bragged about being the best mother and dog owner in the world, but neither a kid nor a dog was ever seen outside. Not once. Sam noticed she bought large amounts of dog food, but didn't seem to buy groceries a child would need. That faded pushcar in the yard never moved. It always sat in the same place, caught in grass, like it had been abandoned. At first, Sam had doubted himself. He worried he was overthinking. He worried police would dismiss him. He worried that if he was wrong, he'd create tension with the neighbor who lived right across from him. So he watched. He took careful handwritten notes. He used binoculars and his drone whenever he could. He tried to convince himself he was being cautious, that discretion was kinder. Then, his drone captured footage of Zuri feeding her son from a dog bowl. The footage itself couldn't be used in court, but it was enough to make the police take the situation seriously. With Sam's notes about her schedule, officers conducted covert surveillance. That led to the raid tonight. As a safeguard, Sam agreed to behave like he was still spying, so Zuri wouldn't notice police presence if she saw something strange in the sky. The officer listening to all this looked unsettled. He walked over to Sam, said something about a bright future, gave him a pat on the shoulder. Sam nodded politely, not soaking in the praise, not playing hero. As Zuri was shoved into a police car, neighbors started yelling. Some flipped her off. One man in a gray shirt with the word "fake" tried to throw his slippers at the car, and an officer warned him back. Sam took none of it in. He returned to his house after agreeing to testify. On the way, the reporter stepped in front of him, microphone raised, camera lens aimed from a distance. "Sam," she called, voice sharp with excitement. "How do you feel about being called a hero?" As if he'd rehearsed this in his head and still hated the taste of it. "I appreciate the compliment," he said, "but it's not something I would encourage." He brushed off more questions and went inside. Investigators continued walking evidence out of Zuri's home in plastic bags. One bag buzzed nonstop with phone notifications, and an investigator muttered something to an officer about how her iPhone was still lighting up with messages, coworkers cursing, demanding to know what she'd done, as if their praise from earlier in the night belonged to a different person. The Stars and Stripes flag above the porch fluttered in the wind, and for a strange second it looked almost ashamed, like it wanted to hide. Police ordered residents back indoors. People lingered anyway, hungry for the story, hungry to feel safe because the monster had been found in someone else's house and not theirs. In the ambulance, Zuri's son stared quietly at the lights flashing outside. Paramedics spoke gently to him. Officers asked him if he could tell them his name, if he was hurt, if he understood he was safe now. The boy didn't answer. He didn't speak at all. He only knew how to growl and bark. Story 8. My first year of college, I made a close friend I'll call Neil. We clicked fast, the kind of friendship where you're suddenly eating meals together, studying together, and somehow you're always in the same place without even planning it. A few months in, he asked if I wanted to take a week-long trip to Maine. I'd never been. All I knew about Maine was forests, cold air, and those postcard lakes that look like mirrors. So I said yes immediately. I was excited in that simple way you get when you're young, and everything feels like an adventure. Neil seemed excited too. He planned the route, packed snacks, and acted like it was no big deal, like he'd done trips like this 100 times. The drive itself was fun. We blasted music and talked about everything and nothing. It started out normal. Highways, exits, gas stations, places you could stop for coffee and use the bathroom without thinking twice. But as we got closer, the mood began to change. At first it was subtle. The towns got farther apart. The road signs started listing distances that felt too long. Then the landscape shifted completely. Tall pine trees crowded the road on both sides, dense and dark, like they were leaning in. They swallowed the sky in places. Even in daylight, some stretches of road felt dim, like the sunlight couldn't fully reach the ground. It should have felt peaceful, and in a way, it did. But it also felt heavy, like the quiet wasn't empty, like it was full of something you couldn't see. We were staying near a lake, one of those places where the air smells clean and sharp, and the water looks black at night because the trees and sky blend together. During the day, it was beautiful. We swam, cooked cheap food, explored the area, and joked about how we were living like wilderness guys, even though we were clearly just college kids playing pretend. At night, though, everything changed. The wind would die, the lake would stop moving, and the silence would settle in so deep, it felt like pressure in your ears. Not the relaxing kind of silence. The kind where you suddenly realize how far away you are from other people. There wasn't much to do up there at night, so we started taking edibles pretty often. It wasn't even about getting messed up. It was boredom mostly, and the lake at night felt like it was made for that. Dark water, distant stars, the occasional sound of a fish breaking the surface. We'd hop into our canoes and drift across the water like we owned the place. Sometimes we tried to fish. Sometimes we just floated and watched the moonlight ripple across the lake. The lake felt alive at night, like it was breathing, in and out, slow and patient. We knew we weren't really supposed to be out there. You were supposed to carry lights after sunset. And more importantly, you weren't allowed to be on the water after dark at all. We'd seen the rules posted near the docks. We'd laughed about them the first day, like rules were for other people. So whenever we saw boats far off in the distance, we assumed it was patrol. The second we spotted them, we'd lower our heads and lie down low inside the canoes, barely moving until they passed. It felt stupid and exciting at the same time, like sneaking around in a world that didn't belong to us. Most nights, nothing happened. Until one night, we decided to paddle out to a giant island in the middle of the lake. It wasn't a small little patch of land. This was a real island. Trees, shoreline, and a dark shape that sat in the center of the water like it had always been there, watching everything around it. We'd seen it in daylight. It looked harmless then, kind of inviting even. At night, it looked different. At night, it looked like the kind of place you weren't supposed to go. Still, we went anyway. We paddled quietly, trying not to splash. The edibles made everything feel slow and sharp at the same time. The water sounded louder than it should have. Every little movement felt like it echoed. When we reached the island, we didn't dock at the obvious spot. We didn't want to be seen. We circled until we found a section of shoreline with thick bushes that could hide the canoes. We slid in carefully and shoved the boats deep into the greenery. Neil tossed his belongings into his canoe and put his flashlight inside it, like he always did. I tucked mine underneath my shirt. As we finished hiding the canoes, Neil paused and tilted his head. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I froze, listening. What? Light, not ours. I listened harder. All I heard was the water and the soft movement of leaves in the wind. I shrugged it off. Neil did too, after a second, like he'd decided he didn't want to be the paranoid one. We started walking. There was a narrow trail cutting into the woods from the shoreline. It was barely visible in the dark, more like a gap between trees than an actual path. The woods swallowed the light quickly, and we moved slowly, careful not to snap branches or crunch loud through the leaves. We didn't even make it far. Almost instantly, the entire trail lit up. A bright beam swept through the trees. Then another. Then another. A search boat. Its spotlight cut across the island like a blade. The light flickered between branches, turning the woods into harsh white flashes, then dropping it back into darkness. It looked like someone was scanning for movement, searching for something hiding among the trees. My stomach dropped. We stopped moving immediately and pressed ourselves behind the nearest trees. I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. I could hear Neil's breathing beside me, shallow and fast. The light moved back and forth, slow and steady. It wasn't random. Whoever was on that boat was looking. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. Not Neil's. Not the boat either, because the sound came from the woods, close on the island, moving through leaves and brush. One step, then another, slow, deliberate, like whoever it was didn't care about being quiet. Neil looked at me. I looked at him. In the flashes of light, his face looked pale. Neither of us moved. Our brains were stuck between two kinds of fear. If we ran, the boat might catch us. We'd be lit up like targets, two idiots on an island after dark. They'd probably call us out, maybe even report us. But if we stayed still, whatever was walking through the woods with us might find us first. The steps came again, closer this time, leaves crunching, branches brushing. I could tell Neil was trying to decide if it was an animal, but something about the rhythm didn't feel like a deer. It wasn't quick or nervous. It was steady, like it knew exactly where it was going. The boat light drifted away for a moment, scanning another section of shoreline. That was our chance. Neil grabbed my sleeve and whispered, "Go." We moved as fast as we could without crashing through the woods. We followed the trail back toward the shore where we'd hidden the canoes. I stepped exactly where Neil stepped so I wouldn't trip, because I couldn't afford to fall and make noise. The shoreline was close. We were almost there. And then that damn spotlight swept back toward us again. The woods exploded with light. Every branch, every leaf, every tiny movement became visible. Neil and I dove into the bushes and pressed ourselves flat, hoping the foliage would hide us. We didn't speak. We barely breathed. And lying there, on my back, staring up through leaves, I heard the footsteps again. Closer, much closer. At first it was faint. Then it became clear. Something pushing through brush, leaves crunching under weight, branches sliding across fabric or skin. It wasn't running. It was approaching, slow and steady. And the worst part was that it felt like it was headed toward the only opening, the entrance to the trail, the exact place where we were hiding nearby. I gripped my metal flashlight like a weapon, my fingers tight enough to hurt. My mind was racing through stupid thoughts like, what if it's some guy? What if it's a hunter? What if it's someone living out here? What if it's a patrol officer who got off the boat? But none of those thoughts made the fear go away, because none of them explained why it felt like the steps were coming directly for us. The boat engine hummed closer again, moving across the water. The light brushed our section of shore once more. Then, suddenly, the engine changed. It growled louder, like the boat accelerated. The spotlight swung away, and the sound of it sped off into the darkness, leaving the island in silence again. For a split second, relief washed over me. Then the truth hit. We were alone now. No boat, no light, no witness. Just us, the canoes, and whatever was in the woods. The footsteps continued. They closed the distance until it felt like the sound was 5 feet away, just beyond the tree line, just around the bush. Neil's body tensed beside me. I could feel it, even without looking. We didn't have a choice anymore. We had to run, not toward the trail, not deeper into the island, to the water, to the canoes. As quietly as possible, we crawled through the bushes to where we had shoved our canoes earlier. We grabbed them by the sides and dragged them out, fighting against branches that tried to hold them back. Every scrape sounded too loud in the dark. We got them to the shoreline. We shoved them into the water. My hands were shaking so hard, I nearly dropped the paddle. And that's when Neil froze. "Wait," he whispered sharply. I looked at him. What? His eyes were wide. I'm missing my flashlight. My heart sank instantly, not because I cared about the flashlight, because stopping meant losing time. Stopping meant giving whatever was behind us a chance to catch up. Neil swore under his breath and started searching frantically through his canoe. He was sure he'd put it inside. He kept digging through bags, hands moving too fast, making little noises that felt impossible to hide. I kept looking over my shoulder toward the trees, expecting to see a shape step out. The footsteps had gone quiet, which somehow felt worse, because now it was either standing still, or it was close enough to not need to walk anymore. Neil's breathing turned ragged. He lifted his head slowly, like he felt it too. Then he pointed. The flashlight was sitting on top of a rock, not tossed there, not dropped, balanced perfectly upright in the center of the rock, like someone had placed it with care, like someone wanted it to be seen, like someone wanted us to notice it. Neither of us had put it there. Neil didn't even question it. He grabbed it instantly and shoved it into the canoe. We didn't speak. We didn't look back. We pushed off into the water and paddled hard, cutting across the open lake with everything we had. Our paddles slapped the surface, loud and frantic. The night air burned in my lungs. My arms ached, but I didn't slow down. The island shrank behind us. Dark trees faded into a darker sky. Nothing followed us across the water. No boat light, no engine, no silhouette on the shore. Just empty darkness where the island had been. When we finally reached the side of the lake near where we were staying, we dragged the canoes onto land and stood there shaking, listening for any sound that didn't belong. There was only the wind, only the quiet water, only our breathing. We went inside without saying much. Neil kept glancing at the windows like he expected to see someone standing outside. I did too. That night, neither of us took edibles. Neither of us joked. We just sat there, wide awake, waiting for sunrise. In the days that followed, we tried to explain it. We tossed around ideas. Maybe it was another group of people sneaking onto the island. Maybe it was a ranger. Maybe the edible paranoia made everything feel worse. But the flashlight didn't fit any normal explanation. Someone had taken it. Someone had carried it. Someone had placed it upright on that rock, in the dark, in the middle of a situation where we were already scared and hiding. And to this day, we still don't know what that search boat was looking for. But deep down, I've always believed one thing. Whatever they were searching for, it probably wasn't searching for us. It was already there. Story 9. In the fading light of her life, Miss Scott still saw that day as clearly as if it had happened an hour ago. Time had taken many things from her: friends, colleagues, the strength in her knees, the sharpness in her hearing. But it had not taken that afternoon. That day remained untouched, preserved in her mind with cruel precision. She remembered everything. The sunlight had been bright, almost too bright, pouring through the tall classroom windows in thick golden beams. Dust floated lazily in the air, drifting like tiny planets in their own quiet universe. The room had been warm, comfortable in that heavy way classrooms often are after lunch. She remembered the clothes she had worn: khaki pants, a red checked shirt. She had tied her hair back that morning because it was going to be warm, and she did not like it sticking to her neck. She remembered the children too, every one of them. Charlotte had worn her hair in a single thick golden braid that hung down her back. The braid was so perfect that half the boys in class could not resist tugging it when they thought she would not notice. She had been patient about it, rolling her eyes but smiling. Piper had been flushed that morning, feverish. Miss Scott had sent her to the nurse before noon. Later, she overheard Piper's mother complaining in the hallway about having to leave work early to pick her up. Miss Scott had felt slightly guilty for causing trouble. Afterward, she would feel something very different: gratitude. That afternoon, Miss Scott had been standing at the blackboard. She had just finished writing the 6 times table in neat white chalk. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. The numbers looked ordinary, harmless. The children were quiet, not the restless, buzzing quiet of the morning, not the fidgeting and whispering and giggling that usually filled the air. It was the slow, heavy stillness that came after lunch. Full stomachs, warm sun, the kind of stillness that made eyelids droop. She had been thinking she should close the blinds, maybe have them stand up and stretch, get the blood moving again. She glanced at the clock on the wall. 1:11. The number stuck with her. It would always stick with her. And then it happened. There was no sound, no warning, no rumble in the distance, no flicker of lights. At first, she thought the class had simply drifted into sleep all at once. It was almost comical. A strange, shared drowsiness. A group prank. Children were capable of that sort of thing. But it was too sudden. One moment they were there, small bodies in desks, pencils in hands, eyes moving across notebooks. The next moment, their eyes closed. All of them. Every single one. They exhaled together, a soft collective sigh. And then there was no inhale. Some children slid sideways out of their chairs, collapsing to the floor in awkward positions. A few slumped backward, their necks loose. Faces turned toward the ceiling, mouths slightly open. Others dropped forward, their foreheads striking their desks with dull, small thuds. Chairs scraped, pencils rolled. Then, nothing. Miss Scott stood frozen at the front of the room, chalk still in her hand. The poses were so dramatic that for a split second she truly believed it was a joke, a coordinated prank, a rehearsed trick. She waited for giggles, for someone to peek, for a burst of laughter. It did not come. They did not move. The silence became unbearable. And in that silence, she knew. She did not know how she knew. She had no medical training, no explanation. But something in the air had shifted. Something enormous and wrong pressed down on her chest. Then, the screaming began. It started somewhere down the hall, a sharp, torn sound that did not belong in a school. It was not the sound of discipline or frustration. or a scraped knee. It was the sound of a mother realizing her child was gone. Mrs. Roy. Her daughter Penelope was in Miss Scott's class. The scream echoed through the corridors, growing louder, breaking into sobs and words that no one could fully understand. Chairs fell over in neighboring classrooms. Doors banged open. Footsteps thundered. Miss Scott could not move. She stared at the rows of small bodies in her classroom, perfectly still, faces peaceful, as if they had simply drifted into dreams. Above her, in the classroom one floor higher, Mr. Anderson had seen the same thing. Rows of children, all of them gone. It was too much. He rushed to the window. Later, Miss Scott would learn that he did not hesitate. He did not call for help. He did not wait. The sight of those children, lifeless at their desks, broke something inside him instantly. He threw himself out the window. Miss Scott remembered the way the sunlight disappeared for a fraction of a second. A shadow passed across her classroom window. Then came the thud, a sickening final sound. She would later understand that it was his body hitting the ground below, the very body that had darkened her window for that brief second. But in that moment, all she felt was the world coming apart. Within minutes, the school was chaos. Teachers screamed. Some tried to perform CPR. Some called emergency services with shaking hands. Parents who had been nearby rushed inside, pushing through doors, desperate to reach their children. The ambulances came quickly, but they did not matter. Nothing mattered, because this was not just her classroom. It was not just her school. Across the country, at exactly 1:11, children between the ages of 5 and 16 had collapsed at their desks. Millions of them, in cities, in rural towns, in private schools, in public schools, in classrooms and cafeterias and gymnasiums. They simply exhaled and did not inhale again. The world did not understand. Doctors ran tests. Specialists examined bodies. Autopsies were performed. The results were the same every time. Perfect. No trauma. No disease. No poison. No visible cause. The bodies were healthy. Healthy children who had simply stopped. Theories spread faster than facts. Some said it was a foreign attack. Russians, Chinese, Canadians, Arabs. The names changed depending on who was speaking. Others blamed the government. Some whispered about a new kind of disease that targeted only children. Conspiracy groups claimed alien waves had passed through the atmosphere, that it was a test, that it was punishment, that it was evolution. Nothing was proven. No official explanation was ever given. Parents flooded the streets, grief turning into rage. There were riots in major cities. Buildings burned. People demanded answers that did not exist. For months, the world felt unstable, like it had been knocked off its axis. Then, slowly, it settled. The economy staggered and then adjusted. Schools changed. Birth rates shifted. Life, in its stubborn way, continued. But for Miss Scott, it never truly moved forward. She attended funerals until she could not bear to attend another. Tiny coffins, white flowers, photographs of smiling faces that would never age. She visited Charlotte's parents. They kept the braid. They had cut it gently and saved it in a box. Mrs. Roy stopped speaking to her, not out of blame, out of shared silence. Years passed, decades. New teachers were hired. Old ones retired. The school building was renovated. A new wing was added. The classroom where it happened was repainted. The clock was replaced, but 1:11 remained burned into Miss Scott's memory like a scar. Now she sits alone in a small room in a quiet care facility. The world outside is different. Technology has changed. People have grown used to not having answers. But sometimes, in the late afternoon, when the light hits her window just right, she is back there. She can see the dust in the air. She can feel the chalk between her fingers. She can hear the soft collective exhale. She wonders if she is the only one who still remembers it with this much clarity. The news calls it Disaster Day. History books give it paragraphs. Documentaries mention it in careful tones. But most people speak of it rarely now, as if talking about it too much might wake something. Miss Scott does not have that luxury. For her, it is still happening. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees the children at their desks. She sees their faces frozen in that final peaceful moment. She remembers Piper's fever. She remembers Charlotte's braid. She remembers the sun going dark for a split second. She remembers the thud. And as she waits quietly for death to come for her, she sometimes wonders if, when her time arrives, she will exhale the same way they did, softly, without warning. And if, somewhere, someone will glance at a clock and remember the time. Story 10. In the fading twilight of her life, Miss Scott still lived with that day as if it had never ended. The years had taken her strength, her friends, her career, and most of the faces that once filled her world. But they had not taken the memory. That afternoon remained untouched in her mind, sharp and complete, as though preserved behind glass. She remembered everything. The sunlight had been strong that day, pouring through the classroom windows in warm golden sheets. It lit up the floating dust in the air and made the wooden desks glow softly. The room had that sleepy after-lunch feeling, heavy and slow. Outside, the world went on as usual. Cars passed. Birds moved between trees. Nothing in the sky or on the ground gave any warning. She remembered what she had worn: khaki pants, a red checked shirt. She had almost chosen a blue blouse that morning, but decided against it because the red felt brighter. She could still see herself smoothing the fabric before leaving home, never knowing how important that detail would become in her memory. She remembered the children. Charlotte had her hair pulled back into a single thick golden braid that hung neatly down her back. It was so perfectly done that the boys could never resist tugging at it when they thought she was not paying attention. Charlotte would sigh dramatically, then smile anyway. Miss Scott had meant to tell them to stop that day, but she never got the chance. Piper had not even been there for the afternoon. She had come in looking flushed and tired, her forehead warm when Miss Scott gently touched it. The nurse had confirmed the fever, and Piper had been sent home before noon. Her mother had not been pleased about leaving work to pick her up. Miss Scott remembered overhearing the complaint in the hallway. Later, she would feel something close to relief when she thought about that complaint. Standing at the blackboard, Miss Scott had just finished writing the 6 times table in clean white chalk. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 2 is 12. The numbers looked steady and dependable, the kind of simple truth children could hold on to. The class was quiet in that calm way that comes after lunch. There was no morning chatter, no small arguments over pencils, no bursts of laughter, just a gentle stillness. Some children rested their chins in their hands. Others stared at their notebooks. A few blinked slowly, fighting sleep. Miss Scott had been thinking she should close the blinds. The sunlight was warm, almost too warm. Maybe she would have them stand up and stretch, shake off the drowsiness. She turned her head toward the clock. 1:11. The numbers burned into her mind. And then it happened. There was no sound, no warning, no flicker of lights or tremor in the floor. At first, She thought it was a strange coincidence. Every child's eyes closed at once. It looked almost rehearsed, as if they were acting out some silent game she had not been told about. She heard a soft, collective exhale, a single breath shared by the room. And then nothing. No inhale. One child slid sideways from his chair and hit the floor in a slow, dramatic fall. Another slumped backward, neck loose, face tilted toward the ceiling. A girl at the front dropped forward, her forehead landing gently on her desk. Pencils rolled. A chair tipped over. The room was filled with stillness. Miss Scott stood frozen, chalk still in her hand. For one desperate second, she told herself it was a prank, a joke planned behind her back. The dramatic poses looked almost theatrical. She waited for giggles, for someone to peek through half-closed eyes. No one moved. No one breathed. And in that unbearable silence, she knew. She did not understand how she knew. There was no medical explanation forming in her mind, but something in her chest tightened with certainty. Something was terribly wrong. Then the screaming began. It came from down the hallway, a sound so raw and broken that it did not seem human. It sliced through the quiet and echoed against the walls. Mrs. Roy, her daughter Penelope, was in Miss Scott's class. The scream carried through the building, followed by frantic footsteps, doors slamming open, teachers shouting names into rooms that would not answer back. It was not Mrs. Roy who threw herself from a window. That was Mr. Anderson. His classroom was directly above Miss Scott's. He had seen the same sight she had, rows of children lifeless at their desks. It had been too much for him. The shock had cracked something inside him beyond repair. He ran to the window. Miss Scott remembered the moment her own classroom darkened for just a fraction of a second, as though a cloud had passed over the sun. Then came the thud, a heavy, final sound that seemed to shake the ground. Later, she would learn that it had been Mr. Anderson's body hitting the pavement below. That was the shadow that had crossed her window. That was the sickening sound she would replay in her mind for decades. Emergency services arrived quickly. Sirens filled the streets. Parents rushed into the school, some pushing past police officers, some collapsing in hallways. Teachers attempted CPR with shaking hands. Nurses moved from body to body. It did not matter, because it was not only their school. Across the country, at exactly 1:11 in the afternoon, millions of children between the ages of 5 and 16 had collapsed at their desks. In cities and small towns, in public schools and private academies, in classrooms, cafeterias, and gymnasiums, they had all exhaled, and none had inhaled again. The world reeled. News broadcasts ran without pause. Doctors searched desperately for a cause. Autopsies were performed in laboratories across the country. The results were the same every time. Perfect bodies. No poison. No disease. No trauma. No visible explanation. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some claimed it was an attack from a foreign power. Others blamed the government. Some spoke of experimental weapons. Others of invisible waves from space. Alien signals. Biological warfare. Secret programs gone wrong. Nothing was proven. No official explanation was ever released. Parents flooded the streets in grief and fury. Riots broke out in major cities. Buildings burned. People demanded answers that no one could give. The economy faltered under the weight of loss. Schools closed. Entire communities fell silent. Then, slowly, the world adjusted. Birth rates changed. School systems restructured. Businesses struggled. And then stabilized. Life, in its relentless way, continued forward. But for Miss Scott, time did not move the same way. She attended funeral after funeral until she could no longer bear the sight of small white coffins. She visited parents who stared at her with hollow eyes, not blaming her, not forgiving her, just sharing a grief too large for language. Charlotte's parents kept her braid. They had cut it carefully before the burial, preserving it in a small box. Piper's mother never stopped thanking Miss Scott for sending her home early that day. Mrs. Roy never truly spoke to her again, not out of anger, just because some silences are too heavy to cross. Years passed, decades passed, new teachers were hired, old teachers retired. The school building was renovated. Classrooms were repainted. The clock that had shown 1:11 was replaced. But the time remained frozen in Miss Scott's mind. Now she sits in a small room in a quiet care facility, waiting for the end of her own life. The world outside has grown used to not knowing. Disaster Day, as it is called in textbooks, is summarized in a few paragraphs. Documentaries discuss it in careful tones. Younger generations speak of it as history, something distant and abstract. Sometimes Miss Scott feels like she is the only one who truly remembers. In the late afternoons, when sunlight filters through her window just right, she is back in that classroom. She can see the chalk dust floating in the air. She can feel the warmth of the room. She can hear the soft, shared exhale. She remembers Piper's flushed cheeks. She remembers Charlotte's braid. She remembers the shadow crossing her window. She remembers the thud. And as she waits for death to come for her, quietly and without warning, she sometimes wonders if it will feel the same. A single breath out, no breath in. And somewhere, perhaps, a clock will read 1:11. Story 11. I live alone now. Not because I ever wanted to, and not because I thought I would. It just happened that way. One event led to another, and eventually, there was no one left in the house but me. 10 years ago, my daughter Anna died. She was 14. Less than a year after that, my wife Maria and I divorced. I don't blame her. I barely blame myself anymore, though I used to. After Anna died, I fell apart in ways I didn't even recognize at first. I drank constantly. I avoided conversations. I avoided Maria. We stopped touching. Stopped speaking unless it was necessary. The grief didn't bring us together. It hollowed us out and left us staring at each other across something neither of us could cross. She needed me to stay steady. I couldn't. I nearly drank myself to death before I admitted I needed help. I checked into rehab because I ran out of excuses. When I got out, I tried to build something that looked like a life. I called old friends, went to dinners, forced myself into conversations that felt exhausting. I even dated for a while, but every time it started to feel serious, I would pull away. I didn't know how to let someone into a house that felt haunted. I should have sold it. That thought comes to me often. Whenever I travel, whenever I stay somewhere else, I sleep better. Hotels, business trips, even crashing on a friend's couch. Away from that house, my chest feels lighter. I don't wake up at night listening. But every time I return, the air changes. The hallways feel longer than they should. The silence feels thick. Sometimes I wake up certain I've heard a door upstairs open. Anna's door. We never changed her room. Maria wanted to at first. She said it was unhealthy to keep it frozen in time. I refused. Then, eventually, neither of us had the strength to argue about it. Her bed is still made. The same comforter. Her notebooks and school papers still clutter the desk. The closet is full of clothes she never got to grow out of. She died in that room. They called it an accident. No signs of anything unusual. Nothing that could have been predicted. That's what the report said. That's what everyone repeated to us, like it was supposed to help. I remember how withdrawn she became in those final months. Her door stayed closed more often. Sometimes I would walk down the hallway and stop outside it. My hand would hover near the wood. I would almost knock. Almost. I drink less now. I've been sober for a long time. But some nights, I wander the house. I don't remember exactly when I started going into her room again. At first, I only stood in the doorway. Then I would step inside and sit on the edge of the bed. Eventually, I started lying down on the carpet, staring up at the ceiling until I fell asleep. It felt like the only place I could still be near her. One night, the door was closed. That caught my attention immediately. We always left it open. Always. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wood like it might explain itself. Finally, I reached out and turned the handle. It opened easily. I stepped forward too quickly and tripped over something unseen, falling hard onto the carpet. My shoulder hit first, then my cheek. The room was darker than usual. I remember thinking I should turn on the light. Then everything went black. When I woke up, it was still dark. My head throbbed. My mouth tasted sour, like old metal. I pushed myself up slowly, blinking. I took one step forward and ran straight into a door. That didn't make sense. Anna's room had only one door, the one that led back to the hallway. I reached out. My fingers touched wood, a handle. Confused, I turned around. Behind me was another doorway. Through it, I could see the hallway outside her room, the familiar wall, the framed picture near the stairs. I stepped backward through it. The hallway looked normal. I turned back around. Where Anna's bedroom should have been, there was a different door, darker wood, a handle I had never seen before, and beyond it, a short corridor stretched forward, maybe 5 or 6 meters long. At the end was another door. My stomach tightened. I stepped back again. My house. Forward. The corridor. I repeated it several times, back and forth. Each time the transition was instant. No flicker, no shift, just two realities separated by a threshold. Finally, I stopped going back. I stepped forward. The corridor was narrow, but straight. The walls were painted at first, like any hallway. The first door I reached was white, slightly chipped near the handle. I opened it. Another short stretch of hallway. Another door. Each door was different. Some were painted bright colors. Some were old and scratched. Some looked warped by age and moisture. As I moved forward, the walls changed too. Wallpaper peeled away, revealing bare concrete. Then the concrete gave way to rough stone. I counted the doors at first. 1, 2, 3. By 21, I lost track. There were no stairs, no turns, just a straight path lined with doors. Behind one of them, I heard something. Help. The word was faint, almost swallowed by the air. I froze. My chest tightened painfully. I stepped closer to the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Then again, help. It was soft, thin, familiar. I opened the door. There was no room beyond it, just another door standing alone. This one was black, not painted black, darker than that, like polished stone that swallowed light instead of reflecting it. Carved into its surface were words. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. There was no handle. My pulse hammered in my ears. Behind me, I heard something shift. Help. Closer now. I turned around slowly. The door I had just come through stood slightly open. For a second, I thought I saw movement in the darkness behind it. Then I heard it. "Dad." I hit the ground hard. It was her voice. Not an echo, not imagination. Clear, soft, the way she used to say it when she wanted something but didn't want to ask too loudly. My mind raced for explanations. Grief, trauma, some kind of hallucination. But if there was even the smallest chance, I stood and pushed the black door. It resisted at first, then slowly opened inward. The corridor beyond was no longer smooth or straight. Rough stone curved overhead. Torches burned along the walls, their flames steady and yellow. The air smelled damp and metallic, like old blood. There was no door at the far end. Instead, a narrow crawl space had been carved into the rock. "Dad." The voice came from within it. I took one of the torches from the wall and dropped to my stomach. The stone scraped against my chest and arms as I dragged myself forward. My elbows burned. My knees tore against the ground. The tunnel was barely wide enough for me. After a few minutes, my arms trembled with effort. I lowered the torch slightly and saw writing carved into the stone beneath me. "They should make them crawl on their bellies to enter the kingdom of darkness." The words made my stomach twist. Ahead of me, the air shifted. Breathing, not mine. Slow, wet, close. I froze. It inhaled again. Closer. I began pushing backward, scraping my skin raw against the rock. The torch flickered wildly, casting violent shadows along the tunnel walls. Then I saw it. A face in the darkness ahead. Black eyes that did not blink. A smile stretched too wide across pale skin. Its skull was elongated, almost like a dog's, but twisted wrong. The proportions were off. The teeth were too many, too sharp. It did not crawl toward me. It slid forward, as if the stone itself parted to let it pass. I tore myself backward and stumbled upright, dropping the torch. Behind me, something scraped violently against the rock. I ran. Doors flashed past in a blur. I don't remember how many I crossed. 4 doors away from my house, I looked back. It was larger now, hairless, distorted. It moved on all 4s, but not in any way that belonged to an animal. Its limbs bent strangely. 3 heads rose from its shoulders. One had black eyes. One had red. One had empty sockets. All of them were smiling. It was gaining. I burst through my front door and lunged for the stairs. I missed a step. I remember falling. The sharp crack of impact. Then nothing. Morning light woke me at the bottom of the staircase. The house was normal. No extra doors. No stone walls. No torches. Just my hallway. My elbows were torn open. My sleeves were ripped nearly to the shoulder. My skin burned like I'd crawled across gravel for miles. I cleaned myself up carefully, bandaged my arms, told myself it had been a nightmare, a stress dream, a relapse of grief. I decided I would not stay in the house that night. As I stepped outside to get air, a car pulled into the driveway. Maria. She got out slowly, looking tired. "I was visiting my father," she said. "I tried calling you. It went straight to voicemail. I hadn't heard it ring." She studied my face, then my bandaged arms. "What happened?" I fell down the stairs. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you? Or are you drinking again?" "I'm not," I said firmly. She watched me for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Upstairs, Anna's door was closed. "I thought we kept it open," Maria said quietly. So did I. She walked over and turned the handle. The room looked exactly as we left it. The bed, the desk, the closet. No second door, no corridor, no stone. Maria rested her hand on the dresser. I still think about that night, she said softly. I should have checked on her sooner. Neither of us spoke after that. She left in the afternoon. I stood at the top of the stairs long after her car disappeared down the street. The hallway was quiet. Anna's door was open. I don't know how long I stood there watching it, but at some point, without a sound, it began to close, slowly, on its own. Story 12. I've worked night shift dispatch for 6 years. You hear everything in this job. After a while, it stops landing the way it used to. The first year, every call stuck to me. I'd go home and replay voices in my head. Now, it's different. Overdoses, domestic fights, break-ins. Once a guy called because he was sure his fish was having a seizure. You log it, you route it, you stay calm. You become a voice in a system. You stop feeling like a person and start feeling like part of a machine that never sleeps. Anyway, Tuesday night, slow shift. Around 2 a.m., the kind of hour where time stretches thin and the fluorescent lights feel harsher than usual. A call came in from a number with an area code I didn't recognize. That's normal with cell phones. I answered without thinking. 911, what's your emergency? There was a small pause. Not dead air, just silence. Breathing on the line. Then a woman said, I need to report a missing person. Routine. Muscle memory. I straightened in my chair and pulled up the form. Okay, what's the name of the missing person? Her name is Sarah Okafor. That's my name. I didn't react. Coincidences happen. It's not the most common name, but it's not impossible. I kept my voice steady. And what's your relationship to the missing person? Another pause. I am her. I know what my voice sounds like. I've heard it on training recordings. On body cam playback, when we're reviewing procedures. On my old voicemail greeting that I never update because I hate hearing myself and I don't want to re-record it. I know the way my voice tightens when I'm tired, the way it flattens when I'm focusing, the specific rhythm I use when I'm trying to stay calm. It was me. Not similar. Not close. It was my voice, filtered slightly through a bad connection, but unmistakably mine. My face didn't change. 6 years of training takes over in moments like that. You don't react. You follow protocol. Okay, I said evenly. When was she last seen? She went to work on September 14th. The voice said, and she never really came back. My fingers paused for just a second over the keyboard. September 14th. I hadn't thought about that date in months. I kept typing. And where was she last seen? I asked. At work. Ma'am, I need your location so I can send help. You know where I am. I need you to tell me. There was a soft breath on the other end. Sarah, she said. The way she said my name made my chest tighten. It was the way I say it to myself when I mess something up. Quiet. Tired. Almost disappointed. You know where I am. You've always known. You just stopped looking. Inside, something cold spread through me. Outside, I stayed professional. I ran a silent trace. I flagged my supervisor. I kept her talking. Can you describe the missing person? I asked. She looks like me, the voice said. Same height. Same scar on her left wrist from when she fell off her bike in middle school. Same chipped tooth in the back. I felt my tongue move unconsciously to that tooth. Ma'am, I said carefully, are you in danger right now? Yes, she said. From who? My supervisor was already walking toward me by then. He didn't interrupt. He just stood slightly behind my station, watching the screen. She's been gone since September 14th. The voice continued. She's just been going through the motions, waking up, going to work, saying the right things, but she's not here. My throat felt tight. September 14th was the night my mom called, and I didn't pick up. My dad had been in the hospital. I'd been exhausted and annoyed, and I let it go to voicemail. The next morning, I found out his condition had worsened overnight. I went to work anyway. I didn't cry. I didn't take leave. I just clocked in and answered calls. And I kept doing that. Every day after that felt like pushing forward without actually moving. "I need your address," I said, even though my hands were starting to shake. "You already have it," she said. "You've been there the whole time." The trace finished. My supervisor leaned down and turned the monitor slightly so only I could see it. It was my home address. I live alone. I didn't react. I couldn't. "Units are being dispatched." I lied automatically. There were no units. We don't send officers for abstract statements about being replaced by yourself. Not unless there's immediate danger. "Come find me," she said softly. "It's really dark in here." The line went dead. The call duration blinked on my screen. 2 minutes, 38 seconds. My supervisor looked at me in a way I've never seen before. Not skeptical, not dismissive, not even concerned in the usual way. He looked unsettled. "Trace?" he asked quietly. I nodded once. He didn't say anything else. I finished my shift. I told myself I wouldn't go home right away. I went anyway. The drive felt shorter than usual. My apartment building looked exactly the same. Same cracked sidewalk. Same dim exterior light that flickers occasionally. Nothing looked wrong. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was where I left it. Shoes by the door. Couch slightly angled. Dishes in the sink. Normal. I walked toward the bedroom. I have a full-length mirror on the back of the bedroom door. I've had it for years. Cheap frame. Slight warp in the glass if you look at it from the side. I walked past it. Something made me stop. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a loud sound or a movement in the corner of my eye. It was timing. My reflection was already looking at me before I turned fully toward it. Not by much. Maybe half a second. But it was enough. Like it had been watching me approach and didn't quite sync back up in time. I stood there staring at it. It stared back. The room was silent. I don't know how long I stood there. Eventually, I stepped backward into the hallway without breaking eye contact. Then, I left the apartment. I've been sitting in my car outside my building for 2 hours now. I keep picking up my phone to call someone. My mom, a friend, my supervisor. And then, I put it back down. Because, what would I even say? Hey, I think I might not be the original version of myself. The thing I can't stop thinking about isn't the mirror, though. It's what she said about September 14th. Because she was right. Something changed that night. I stopped feeling present. I started operating. Like I was watching myself from a small distance. Like I was reading lines in a script instead of living. I thought that was just grief, or shock, or survival. But what if it wasn't? What if I really did leave something behind that night? What if something stayed in that apartment when I went to work? And what if the thing sitting in my car right now is the version that kept going? Maybe the call wasn't a threat. Maybe it was a request. Come find me. It's really dark in here. Maybe the dark place isn't physical. Maybe it's the part of me I locked away because I didn't want to feel it. Or maybe there is something in my apartment wearing my face. waiting for me to come back inside. I don't know which option is worse, that something else is in there pretending to be me, or that I'm the one pretending. I can see my bedroom window from here. The lights are off, but every once in a while, I think I see movement behind the curtains. I have to go back in eventually. I just don't know who's going to be there when I do.